All right. Well, great. Let's move on. Round three.
All righty. Well, you set me up nicely with your little switch there, and I'm back. I think I'm back on course now, and it has to work out my way. I'm pretty sure. Um, I've been trying to see if I guessed correctly which poems we're gonna, which order you do things in. That was just personal fun. This is from Notes to Sing, which still is in print. Um, my second chapbook of original poems. Oh, by the way, I am just delighted to be delving into the brains of living men instead of the brain of a guy who's been dead for 650 years. I translate Petrarch, so um,
Mm-hmm.
that also has to do with my men and women viewpoint. But I love Petrarch. Um, this is um, we're gonna get to talk about some of the bad blood here. This is called canonicity, and of course it says in the story in Genesis that after they ate of the knowledge of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, that they saw that they were naked, which the pigs were. Uh, who was it covering their nakedness? But anyway, we had that. Um, and we've already had covering nakedness. So then the Lord God takes the skins of animals and makes clothes. So I decided to imagine Eve, um, after getting kicked out and after Cain slew Abel, and basically they turned into Neanderthals, or clan of the cave bears, more like it, I guess. Canonicity. If Eve had an alphabet besides bone, weren't obliged to use a rat's rib to stitch water bags, flint to carve her husband's breech clouts, or save scrap for catching blood each moon she isn't pregnant, we'd have more to go on. Her story disappeared with the cook smoke. Cain's dog whines and scratches at the mat, vacant now for weeks, where her son slept. She suns it every day, picking off nits, as if he will come home. The river was a 4-day walk, and the reeds cut her fingers. Waste nothing. Evolution's answer to the curse burns her up. She would like to laugh as Adam digs with a charred stick lines in dust.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, wow is right. Wow. Well, let me. This poem is a little challenging for me at first, but I think I'm getting the hang of it. It's very interesting. Let me make sure I understand it. The whole first stanza, and this is a sonnet too, and the whole first stanza is saying that if Eve were what, literate, articulate, I don't know quite what to say, she could tell her own story, then we would understand more about her. More to go on, go on about understanding this whole early Genesis situation that she and Adam and they found themselves in. And then, but she didn't. Her story wasn't written down. She had no alphabet. Her story disappeared. It went up in smoke. Um, so I'm hoping at least I've got that much right. And maybe I don't, I'm not well versed in the Bible, so I may be missing some references here. But it looks like your clan of the cave bear is sort of what came through to me as the
Mhm.
condition that this gang group, uh, family, whatever, what's left of it is in. Um,
Right.
there's definitely anger here. I think Eve is angry. I hope I've got that right. And she's bitter, and the whole thing is just a disaster. Is what it seems like to me. But this is where I'm not sure I'm reading it right, even though I'm intrigued with it. And every time I read it over, I feel like it's coming into focus for me. But I'm you know, it's very compressed. And I love this. The reeds cut her fingers. That's one of these Lee things. Also an Al thing, and not a Dan thing, the thing that would never occur to me to say. So you've imagined your way, you imagine your way into that. So that's my situation with the poem. I think
Okay.
I think it's terrific, but I'm not sure I'm completely getting everything there is to be gotten out of it.
I think it
Okay,
helps if you've got Genesis in hand, firmly in hand. It helps you to provide some of the interstitial information about her situation that is not made explicit in the poem, although it's implied. So, yeah, first of all, the situation that she's in, and this is, well, it was the first time anyone was in this situation. That's what I mean. It's the first time everything that happens. It's the first time it's ever happened, to people. So, so here she is, and we're given the image of the mat where her son slept, and so the reference is to Cain's dog scratching at the mat. So this is Cain's mat, but of course Cain's not there because he's killed his brother. And imagine being the mother of two sons, one of whom kills the other one and then leaves. So Eve would indeed have a tale to tell if she had an alphabet. But instead, the whole middle of the poem is about the crushing domestic requirements of being the only woman on earth at the time. And at the very end, what I like the most about this poem is that the image at the end of the poem is Adam on his way to inventing language, for Christ's sake.
Mm-hmm. Yes, literally.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the story is told by men. Because he's got the time to invent language, damn it. And she doesn't. Am I on the beam here, Lee?
Oh, yes, sir. You sure are. You sure you've never been married?
I have not, but I've been around women all my life. And my mother was married.
And your mother was a woman, yes. Very good.
That's what she told you.
Yeah, well, no, my father concurred. They seemed to agree. They had a very good story if they got together and worked it out ahead of time, what they would claim.
Yeah, I'm just totally kidding.
I know,
No,
but it's
Dan, this really is an angel in the house, Virginia Woolf gripe, which is basically what Al said.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because what I figured out, here I am. I wrote this poem 30 years ago, and it was published, and I was thinking of developing the alphabet, for Christ's sake. But I also, after I translated the first poem in Petrarch's Canzoniere, he talks about, I think he's referring to Virgil's Georgics, where the word verse comes from furrows, because you make a line and you turn around, you do another line and you turn around. So, it actually, he could be out there plowing and doing this job that he does, but it also implies this, thing about developing the alphabet. So I really love double meanings and things,
Yeah.
and where you want to get those is that last line.
Well, there's that. So Al, you did help me follow it. I think I basically kind of got it, even though I was not on solid ground because I don't know my Bible that well at all. But one thing
reading.
It's on my list.
Thrills and chills
on my list. But one thing that I really admire about this, and I think this is very rich, right? It's so well written, this poem. It's very rich. I don't know why Geoffrey Hill popped into my head. This is densely written. It's thick with words and things, uh, yeah, I guess I've just said it that's about all I could say along those lines.
Wow.
But I really mean it. It's very, I just keep going back to the same words. It's densely and richly written, thick with meaning and thick with presenting things and
Yeah,
ideas.
the word choice is very specific and apt.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
which is appropriate for the
I'm knocked out.
yeah for the topic. It's very appropriate because, of course, as I said before, everything that happens, it's the first time it ever happened to anybody, and so the whole question of what language you use to describe a time before language is a really interesting question. And and your version of a solution is to present, as Dan very correctly says, this rich, dense, the words are very carefully chosen. They all strike home. I mean, they work together to produce the effect. It's not it it really displays a very deep intent, if I can put it that way. In other words, it's not a kind of casual statement. There's depth to the statement. I mean, just the things you're calling it a gripe, and the way you read it made it really help to make it clear. You have to use a rat's rib to stitch water bags, right? Or you can't save water. You got to use a flint to scrape the animal skins. It's all primary, which is what it has to be, because this is so early in the story of human history and development that everything has moment, everything has gravity. They've just been tossed out of Eden, for heaven's sake, so to speak, and they've been put east of Eden, where there is the weeping and the gnashing of teeth. And there's weeping and gnashing of teeth just off stage while this poem is being read. I don't know who other women came from that are weeping and gnashing, but you get my point.
Nephilim,
so,
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this is just really strong. Now I have to ask about the title. So you're using canon in the sense of what is in the canon of human history, or how do you mean this word?
Canonicity is supposed to be the clue to the last line, that what is canon is what was written by men. We have two books in the entire Judeo-Christian literature that's accepted as canon that are even about women, but they do very, very, there's the book of Ruth, you've got the book of Esther, but you do have Judges, you do have Moses, Sister Miriam, who was a priestess and who made songs, and the Song of Deborah. You get this in little tiny bits, but generally it has been his story instead of her story. But
Yep.
the thing in here that I guess I'm explaining something to you and I should only listen to what you tell me. But for me, as a woman writing this poem, what struck me was the nature of all the things she did, because the curse on the woman was that you will basically be under your man's domination, and depending on whether this was a God-fearing man or a not God-fearing man, your life could be real good or it could be hell. And that all of these things, she's making water bags to bring water to her family because women always were the water carriers. And she's making her husband's clothes. She's taking care of her personal hygiene. Her mom isn't there, take her to the drugstore. And the thing about she's still making, it's like making his bed because he's going to come home tonight to air it or get the lice out and stuff like that. And that all is this is that's the thing about the curse. And for people like you, Dan, who are not familiar with Bible, that if you're a believing and practicing person, as I am and have been all my life, except for, of course, obvious prodigality when young, but this thing about the curse, because if you are married, if you do have kids, that's what you spend all your time doing, is making them comfortable and subjecting, your will to the commitment you've taken on. And that I think maybe is not something that men are necessarily, men who have not been, who aren't the riflemen and who haven't had to raise their son without their wife, in the Wild West.
Yeah.
So that to me is the I think what women would get, and it probably wouldn't even be fair to ask a man to get that.
But I think I did get. So
Okay.
but I'm glad.
Okay.
But I'm glad to hear you say that that's what's going on, because I mean that was pretty clear. In fact, maybe it's just that it's a little late at night. I think the poem is clearer to me than I'm making it sound now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, it's a very strong poem to me. I really like this. The curse, evolution's answer to the curse. I was intrigued with that. Waste nothing is evolution's answer to the curse, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because Al's a science guy. He can tell this. Wait.
Wow.
Well, no,
talk about putting somebody on the spot. Jeez.
I'd rather have you do it though.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Because it's about how much energy you expend. This is the whole thing. If you have animals like sloth, and their whole thing is don't expend energy, and you don't have to eat so many leaves, that kind of thing, where evolution favors beings that are efficient.
Yeah, that I guess again.
Okay.
Once these things are explained, I did get that. I just wasn't sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just as a little thing for near the end, I appreciate that you have. She would like to laugh as Adam digs with a charred stick in the dust.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah, she can't, but she would like to.
Yeah, now
sometimes she does.
Now another phrase is coming to me. I know we're near the end. This poem is closely worked, and that's an example of it. There's a lot. That's why I keep coming back to it. It's like closely worked, filigree work. Not that it's like frilly at all, but you can see how much each word of this poem was pondered and turned over and chosen.
That's what I meant by intent. Okay. That it displays intent everywhere you look. Yeah. Now this is a great represent. I mean, it's fun for me because I've read so many of your Petrarch translations, which of course is borrowed light, one way or another. So it's great to see you in your own voice, or voices, I should say, because you've got a rogues gallery in there.
I got a crew in here.
So,
I got a crew.
Well, onward. Dan, number 3.
Dan.
Okay, here's a shorter one. I wanted to put in a character.
Okay.
One problem with an episode about characters, and I know you knew this going out into this episode, you must have, is that character poems tend to be long. So it's going to turn out to be a long episode. It'd probably be broken up into two or even three. I don't know how many episodes this is.
Well, that's all right. I break them up into two as a regular
Yeah, I
as
know
a
you do.
regular
So
habit.
I'm not, but it's, so I thought maybe I'm going to try to choose one of my shorter poems that I think is
Yeah.
still about a character. And that's the one called Young Avis.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Oh, I love young Avis.
That's great to hear. All right, so here we go. Young Avis. A name to be, he wakes one day with many destinies in play and consecrates his future to one involving nothing new, to being but a copycat in rent-a-cars, some dogs at that. His hope? To swipe a slice of share. His dream? Did he say billionaire? Of course, an urge to innovate is less than an essential trait, nor need the soul be horror-struck if someone wants to chase a buck. Besides, a guy disposed to know how high it's in himself to go, and better than to aim for higher, a soul could practically admire.
She would like to laugh.
No, I love the aphorism at the end. I mean, it's there. Actually, what impresses me most about this is I I was like a permanent substitute down at the local school for a long time. And so I knew all of the English teachers' things and what they did, and I could just go in and teach their classes. And I think they would take turns being absent, so because they knew I would carry out their lesson plans and the kids would get their stuff and they'd all do well on their tests. But I had a student and his name was Avis. For sure. I had an Avis, and Avis was exactly like this. And the last time I saw Avis was at the county hospital, Mrs. Bahan, because you never get to be anything but Mrs. when you have taught school. You never get your first name back. So Mrs. Bahan, and I was an elderly friend or something, and Avis was there because his girlfriend was having the, and one tries to be as he was all excited, and it was just like this poem that Avis had these big dreams about his little family, and he hadn't married mom yet, didn't know, he was just Avis, but he was just as good as he could be. I mean, he loved that girl, he loved his baby, and but he knew what his place was and what his life was, and he was happy with himself. And I think he meets all your criteria.
I just noticed when you read it, the way that you put copycat next to dogs in adjacent lines.
Ah,
I took it as there are some dogs in the rent-a-cars.
Oh,
When I read it, it's like
right.
a copycat in rent-a-cars where there's some dogs. But anyway, now I see it differently because of the way you read it.
okay.
My only question, and I guess this giving my age away, is that the advertising for Avis was always number two tries harder.
Right.
Oh, I completely missed that.
But this guy is not the number two that's trying harder. He's the number two that's content, or the number 8 that's content.
Mhm. Yeah, the trying harder is not in this poem. Well, it's just what it says. I was just struck that, you get what did Mary Oliver call it, this one wild life. What are you going to do with it? And what he
Yeah.
decides, but this is all, I don't really know if Avis is even a real person. This is all made up, but I imagine Mr. Avis, I think he's a man, um, said, well, you know what? I'm gonna piggyback on this other rent-a-car company, and I'm gonna do what they did and peel off some of their money.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna try to have an original idea or do something new or exciting. I'm
Right.
just gonna try to make some dough. And I just try to, what's it like to be a person like that? That my dream in life is to copy to copy some other hugely successful thing and try to, peel off part of their success for myself. And so that's the scoop. I know yes, he tried harder and all. I'm sure the real Mr. Avis would say, I tried so hard to differentiate myself and be better than Hertz. But I'm thinking more about, I guess I should give him his due. Maybe he got into it because he said, you know what, I could do that better. That's a completely plausible imaginary motivation for him. But
Well,
I'm not giving him credit for
but
that.
that's one possibility. But there are at least two other possibilities. One of them is um, what you say. I can piggyback on a good idea without having to. I don't need to get a good idea. I can just steal somebody else's good idea, and I might not do as well as him, but I'm going to do fine. So that you can have that somebody that just doesn't. And that's kind of where the character in this poem comes down, is he's content with where he is and who he is. But there's another spin that a person could put on this, and that is, I could never have an idea that was any good, so I have to steal somebody's. The only way I can get by is, so in other words, it could come out of a profound sense of inadequacy, or at least an underground sense of that, coupled with the general ambition to make something. But you didn't go in those directions, but they could have gone in that direction. The only other thing I thought might come out in the poem was a play on the avis being avis, bird, rara avis.
Oh,
it's a bird. It's a bird.
Yeah, that's true. No, that didn't, sometimes things just don't cross your mind. That one didn't.
Yeah, that just wasn't. So I thought that might happen, but it didn't. But then it's perfectly clear the kind of person that you're writing about. It's almost like Houseman. Houseman will write about characters, but the way that he does it is completely different. You have this kind of a wry acknowledgement that, well, here's somebody that's doing things a different way. I wouldn't have thought of doing it this way, but he's doing this. And as you say, could practically admire, almost.
Yeah, they're almost. And there is a little pun on practically. It's the practical side of you that would admire.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that the poem is not completely condemnatory of Mr. Avis.
It isn't. It not.
Isn't. The guy, he knew what his limit, he knew what he was capable of and what he wasn't capable of. And and it's good, you can destroy your life thinking you're capable of greater things than you are. He knew how high it's in himself to go. And it is admirable. In fact, you just could, I forget the part, you could admire having a little fun with that. Yeah, so I'd like to think there's a humane, I'm giving some grace to Mr. Avis, even as I'm, saying that I don't quite, it's a little sad, but, I'm not going to condemn him for it. I'm not going to pity him for it, really.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, well, that was the intelligent, correct thing I thought to say about young Avis was this is, Robert Browning. Don't let your reach exceed your grasp.
That's great. Great connection.
And your poems generally, when you go into your beautiful monologues, just really are quite as entertaining and keep moving My favorite one is The Last Duchess. And some of your monologue poems that tell these stories remind me of Brown.
Well, wow.
That's high praise.
What can I say? That's huge praise.
Yeah, I love Browning.
I'll just say one. I once took this poem to a little poetry workshop type group, and one of the guys in there was way more than I knew, was a real right wing kind of person, and he was outraged at this poem. He said, "What are you criticizing this guy for? This is the genius of capitalism, to compete, start your own, and try to do better with life." And I was just astonished at I mean, I get that. I get his point. I see it. I just couldn't understand why he was was completely impervious to my more imaginative take. It's not a political poem or a critique of.
The tone is very moderate. The tone is not negative at all. But he was sensitive.
Yeah, no, he clearly was sensitive. Absolutely. Yeah. Just a side note. Well, okay. Thank you for that. I'm glad you found things to like about this. Yeah. That's great.
Well, all right. I'm going to move to the other one of my other lives.
Oh no.
This is Genius at the Jam. And I realized that there is a question whether I give the reader everything that she or he might need to follow this poem really closely. And my defense is to say that I wrote it with, and I told Lee this in an email conversation we had earlier. I wrote this specifically to submit to Brilliant Corners, which is a publication which prints poems and fiction about jazz. And so the audience for that journal is a jazz audience. And that's all I can say by way of mitigating whatever I may have left out for a reader who is not who's not a musician or not a jazz player or has never been to a jam session or any of those things. And there are probably 8 billion people that fall into that category. So you're not alone, you folks. But, well, hang on. I pulled up the wrong one. There it is. Genius at the Jam. We were lined up on the stage, the mic off to our right, the B3 just beyond, with Rich Lee kicking bass and smoothing out the changes on Just Friends. As usual, the Sunday Jam was in the afternoon. A sprinkling of fans out front, almost as many players waiting for our chance, horns out and warming, ready to sit in. Fingering his alto absently, pads clicking on the metal, Jay, the genius, was soloing already in his mind before he put his mouthpiece in his mouth. His turn at the mic was next. For now, a bald trombonist taller than us all, who stooped and squinted through his big frame glasses, was getting exercised, his right arm shooting out and back as he sawed through a chorus. Then he was done and moved off to the side. So Jay was up, and I slid next to him as the line advanced from left to right. His shades were tight against his temples, just above the dent along his cheekbone, where the bar had glanced off once when he was benching way too much, of course, without a spotter. I popped my valves and turned my head away and looked out at the sidewall where the sun was blasting through the big bay window off the barrier they built for hurricanes. I wondered what would happen next. This was the moment I would finally hear Jay play for real. He used to show up at my house and make me listen to cassettes he'd made. He'd play along with Parker and Gillespie sessions with the mic next to the speaker to catch the second. I'm sorry, with a mic next to the speaker to catch the record and his sound together. But Bird and Diz were easy to pick out. I heard a lot of blips that might be notes from him, all jumbled up amid the bursts of brilliance from the bebop pioneers. He told me that he'd started on guitar and soon could play like Parker on the strings, but he was looking for a bigger challenge, and so he took up alto. I would strain to hear what he was playing on those tapes. There'd be a note or two, then nothing, then a note. The sound was hopeless. When I offered him Music -1 LP so he'd be by himself above a rhythm section, he always found a reason not to take it. But now he was about to show himself. As he approached the mic and set his feet, his mouthpiece brought up to his lips at last. The drummer played a lead-in, and the next chorus commenced. Eyes closed, intent, his breath and fingers furious, he leaned a little into me as he began to play. His upper arm was rigid as a flagpole. The alto's bell banged up against the mic. Inside, his arabesques would stupefy a listener. Outside, he made no sound.
Well, I'll jump in here. The first thing I'll say is that there's no need for the preface that you gave this. I mean, maybe I am into music. I'm not deep into jazz. I just don't think there's anything here that needs to be apologized for, or it's going to be clear even if you don't know a whole lot about jazz. I mean, I know there are some things here. Music, what's it called? Music. I know what Music -1 is. A lot of people might not know that.
Yeah.
Some people might know that not know that Bird is Charlie Parker's nickname. They might not even know that Parker was a saxophonist. Some people might not know that an alto is not a singer but a kind of saxophone. Yeah, all those things could get in people's way a little, but I just don't think you have anything to worry about, really.
Okay, good.
That's myself. I mean, Lee may have a different take. I don't know.
I peppered the poor man with all kinds of questions, but I have a question here that I think would illustrate part of my problem as I quit piano when I was in 3rd grade because they wouldn't let me start composing. I had to.
Great.
That's the saddest thing I've ever heard.
Really, it really.
But anyway, what a better question that I could have asked you that I think would do more good in a discussion. Let's see. As a flagpole, as you read aloud to us, here's the trombone, and he was getting exercise.
You got to turn your head, Lee. You're not facing you got to turn your head into the mic. I'm losing what you're saying.
Okay. The trombonist is sawing that thing. Now, is that compared to, because you do construct things very carefully so we get the pieces we need. But it says that the genius, his upper arm was rigid as a flagpole. Is that supposed to be a sign that he's like faking it and doing absolutely nothing at all?
Actually, I want to, before you answer that, that's one little thing in the poem that I had a little trouble visualizing, because he's playing a sax, and I think the left hand is at the lower part of the instrument, and maybe this is, I got it backwards, and the right hand is up near, they're all fingers are on the valves of the instrument.
Yeah.
I just don't see how you could be playing that instrument with your arm like a flagpole. That just doesn't, unless you're holding things so
you
far
got
up in the air.
You got the top. You're at the wrong end of the flagpole. It was rigid as a flagpole, but it just went up and down. It was just like this. I'm standing next to him.
Right.
So and he's at the mic. So he's within a few inches of me.
Right.
As he's playing, he's so tense that he leans into me and his arm is like it's as stiff as a flagpole.
Oh, now okay, I get that, but now I get that I get it, but to me that was a distraction because I had a real strong visual of a flagpole as a single rod. His upper arm, well, you do say his upper arm was rigid as a flagpole. It's just too bad because the flagpole to me, the visual just doesn't really fit. Maybe it'd be rigid as something else, so that it wouldn't distract me like that. But anyway, we shouldn't be spending all this time talking about that. I just mentioned it because when Lee hit on that, that was a line that I also had a little bit of a struggle with.
That's interesting. I mean, you would only feel that if you were within a few inches of him and he leaned into you. That was the main thing, was to show how tense he was.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No. Now that you're saying it, I get it. And so, what can I say? Maybe because it's so visual, you're getting more the way it felt. But there's a real flash of visualization there when you say rigid as a flagpole. And I had trouble understanding how an upper arm could have anything like I get it now. You say it in as many words, but yet for what it's worth,
interesting.
I present my response. That's the only part of this poem that wasn't immediately apprehensible to me.
Well, that's where a jazz audience is going to be able to see where his arms are, and they're not going to. They won't stick at that point.
Right.
The other thing that they'll know is that the next line, the alto's bell banged up against the mic. That doesn't happen unless you're nervous to the point of spastic.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hit the mic with your bell. That's your horn. You don't scratch it on some mic someplace.
Right. But all this is not really, not to the point of the main point of the poem, which is an interesting anecdote. One gets the feeling that this or something like it really occurred.
Oh, yes.
That's true.
It occurred exactly like this.
Exactly. That's what I would have thought, exactly like this. And again, it's the same thing that I admire in all these. Here, the leisurely, that you take the time to say, where is it? Yeah. The wall where the sun was blasting through the big bay window off the barrier they built for hurricanes. Well, that doesn't have to be in this story, but I love that it's there. It just takes you, it fleshes it out, gives it another dimension, places it, enriches it.
Well, for somebody anybody that went to jam sessions in Providence in the 70s and 80s, there was a place called Al Fisher's Lounge, which was down by the water, and it had a big bay window along one whole side of the room, overlooking the hurricane barrier, which was put in after the 1938 hurricane because downtown Providence flooded as a result of that hurricane. And so this is like a landmark. If you're down in that part of town, you immediately know the hurricane barrier, and so this had a huge bay window that lets you see the hurricane barrier. Probably at one time before the hurricane barrier, it let you see the ocean.
Well, it just shows your mind has this visualization aspect to it. I mean, for what it's worth, which is nothing, I had it in Florida, not Providence, Rhode Island. I had it in Florida because that's what I think of as being worried about hurricanes. Doesn't matter either way. Doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
New Orleans.
Yeah, it could be New Orleans.
That's an even better guess. Because there you're really into the home of jazz, or one of the homes of jazz.
Well, this is one of those things where any number of interpretations are equally useful because you're setting a scene, and everybody can have her or his own imagination of picturing the scene, as long as your eye is drawn to the figure of Jay the genius at the jam, at the key moment. Right. And all I can say is that it was absolutely unnerving to stand that close to somebody and not hear anything.
It's incredible.
I mean, he was rapt. He was frenzied. He was blowing really hard. Nothing.
And nothing. How could you? I mean, so he wasn't getting the proper contact with the reed or something like that. He just wasn't making a sound for, even though he was putting air somewhere, maybe not into the
Well,
alto, maybe around.
yeah. I mean, the deeper question, of course, is brought up earlier in the poem when he would bring tapes to my house and say, "Well, you got to hear this. You got to hear this. I taped this last night." And then you listen and you can't hear anything.
Yeah, I mean that was to me. I mean the poem does not have a surprise ending because you tip it off there, but that's okay. It's inevitable. You know what's coming, but it doesn't really matter to me. That was the most, and maybe it's because I do know something about music. Not one, but two amazingly revealing technical kind of thing that he'd play along. He taped himself playing along with these great records, cassettes, and he put a mic there so he could catch both what was playing on the cassette and hear him adding to it. And you couldn't really hear it. Already your hackles are up. Wait a minute, what's going on? And then you put him to the test. I don't know, Lee, if you know what music minus one is. It's for like a song.
Oh, I do now.
Okay, yeah. So it's the background is there, and it leaves room for you, the student musician, whatever, to play the solo above the orchestra.
It's karaoke.
Yeah, it's like
exactly
like karaoke.
And you're not fighting Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, who are the greatest bebop players of all time, playing a million notes that are brilliant and are very prominent on the record. And then you're asking me to hear something that's virtually inaudible at the same time.
Yeah, those two were both very revealing, and it's a complete tell to what's coming at the end of the poem. But it doesn't matter because this horrible inevitability. And I mean,
well, it's a matter of degree. I mean, you can know that somebody doesn't produce a lot of volume, and so he won't be heard when a record is being played. But
no, he doesn't. When he chickens out, when he doesn't step up to the offer of the music minus one, then you really know this is what's going to happen. But the deepest question for me, which the poem leaves wonderfully open, is whether he heard anything in his own head, brilliant or otherwise, whether the whole thing was some. I think. Well, my guess is that he did, I guess, hear himself playing brilliant stuff. Like I used to think I was composing brilliant pieces in my head, and unlikely, for other reasons, I never composed anything either. So, what's your take, Al? Do you think he heard stuff in his head, or was it all some kind of total?
I think I tell you in the penultimate line.
Yeah, inside he made
his arabesque would stupefy a listener. Outside, where we are,
right.
He made no sound.
So your answer is he did hear it. He heard something in his head. Yeah.
Well, he heard impossible brilliance.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing, and again, if you're a musician, the other tell is that he said, well, I played guitar, but I got to where I could play everything that Parker played on alto.
Yeah, that's
on guitar.
That's crazy.
Well, there are people who can do it. There are people who have done it, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah,
very rare.
Got to be very at that speed. That's got to be very rare.
Yes, but then he says, "So I wanted a bigger challenge,"
right?
And so he takes up the alto because that was Parker's instrument. So he's going to play better than Parker on Parker's chosen instrument. This is the height of chutzpah that he brought to the table. Well, I want a bigger challenge. I'm going to play the alto. And then he plays the alto.
I understood that. That struck me too. It's all completely plausible, and it's related in a way that I had no trouble following it.
Good.
No trouble at all. Now, I'm not the most musically illiterate person there is, but I think a lot of people would basically climb on this thing 80%, which is enough to basically.
Anybody would get the gist. Yeah. Anybody would get the gist, but I can say for an audience of adepts, for a jazz audience, there are all these little details that are juicy,
right?
That they would like,
right? And I knew enough about jazz to get most of them, I think. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Lee,
So,
Well,
Lee, you were shaking your head. Are you saying this? A lot of this
my
you didn't.
problem, I peppered Al with questions about this. I thought the thing with the benching was that he had been damaged and somehow couldn't play properly and was only imagining, or was he like a complete blow off, shoveling BS kind of guy and he's just trying to fake everybody out? Is he deluded? I couldn't find a place to have sympathy for him.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't put myself in his head. I have so much stuff that comes bubbling out of me all the time that's, well, I've been reading you some of it, and I can't imagine finding fun and faking it.
yeah. Well, go ahead, Dan.
No, I was gonna, one odd thing is he chickens out on playing with the music -1. So on some level, he knows that
Okay.
he can't actually do this. At least that's what
This
I
is
take from,
close.
which is really
This close
crazy
to what
because
Al was saying.
knowing that, he still goes up on stage and does a quote performance. That's like nuts. If you try to put those two things together,
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, just to
No,
address,
I'm getting better.
but to address your comment, Lee, I don't think it's possible to have sympathy for something that's fundamentally inexplicable. We don't,
Okay.
but that's okay. You don't have to have sympathy for every character. We don't have any sympathy for the speaker in My Last Duchess.
Yeah, well, that's more, but I agree to your point, Al, I never felt like you were trying to generate sympathy in the reader for this man.
No, I wasn't. But that's essentially what I'm saying.
I think that's about me wanting to have sympathy with characters too.
Mm-hmm,
In
mm-hmm.
some way, I always want to put myself in someone else's shoes. I always want to try.
Yeah, well, you can try, but I don't think that's a place you really want to go for very long.
Mm-hmm.
No.
in his head, and he may be alive. I don't know. There's a chance that he's alive. The bit about the weightlifting was just by way of speaking to what Dan has generously accepted in my adding things that enrich or otherwise deepen the story, but are not central to it. It's, if you've ever done any weightlifting, when you're doing free weights and you're doing bench presses, you have to have somebody there to spot you, because the point of it is you're going to push the thing until you can't push it anymore.
Well,
and when you can't push it anymore, you can't keep it from falling on you.
Yeah, no, I didn't take that in the same way as I took the hurricane barrier. This seemed more relevant because this guy is delusional, and part of his delusional nature is that he thought he could lift those weights, but didn't think he needed a spotter.
Okay.
Right, but what actually happened?
Pride.
But what you do is you lift to failure. So every time you lift, you can't do the last rep.
Right.
That's the way it's supposed. That if you want to keep growing, getting stronger, unless you're just trying to maintain. So what happened was he did that without a spotter, and he dropped the bar, and it glanced, all that weight with the bar glanced off his cheekbone, and just took a chunk. It didn't affect his playing. It didn't improve it. But it didn't affect it. So anyway, enough of all of this. He may be out there, sharpening his long knife as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a true story. So getting into the home stretch, if you will go with number 4, please, Lee.
All righty, now I'm back on schedule. The last 2 semesters that I was working on my MFA at IU, I had to take 2 PhD seminars. And ever since I was in the public library branch near our house after the summer after 8th grade. I read all of the poetry books in the small branch library, and they were, let's see, there was Robert Frost, Emily Dickinson, and T.S. Eliot. And I actually can see the page right there on that library table. And it was a wonder I didn't just, start singing this at the top of my lungs and get the librarian's wrath. But ooh, 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 that Shakespearean rag. I get to that, and it's like I belong to T.S. Eliot forever. So I wanted to, I took both of the PhD seminars in modernism, and along the way, I fell in love with Ezra Pound's prose. And I believe on one of your earlier shows, Al, that there is a discussion of, the river merchant's wife is just
A letter.
is just gorgeous. That
Yes.
poem is gorgeous. The Sestina Altaforte is, I read that and I can't help but like this. Now we know everything else, and now I'm saying everything else that is wrong with Ezra Pound. I have no use for anti-Semitism, but his prose style, and I also like Harlan Ellison's prose style. So this, kind of in-your-face prose, which I enjoy greatly, and like to write. But one of Ezra Pound's friends was Wyndham Lewis, and you guys will know all of this. Don't tell Ernie Hilbert that I have this book, but I found this. This is the Wyndham Lewis's biography of Francois Villon. And in the front of it, it has this dedication that is just absolutely nuts. This is Wyndham Lewis's dedication to the red-headed Cerberus, regardant between the Pont Royal and the Petit Pont. And it goes on like this for this very long
Oh, look at that.
In that shaped poem. It's like Herbert. But it's just this. And he created a style of art called, he was a painter as well as a writer. And he created this school of art called Vorticism. So that's where he got his nickname, was Vort. And it turns out that, he and Pound and all the people were having fun in London at that time. Then along comes World War I. Well, Wyndham Lewis gets drafted, and they put him on the front line as a censor. And here is this guy who just, writes this kind of explosive prose, and they, all of this energy and the movement and all of this kind of stuff. And he wrote, withering criticism. And they make this guy a censor, and he's reading all the love letters that the soldiers are writing and receiving. Do you want this man reading your love letters to your spouse? I just found that a hilarious situation. So I had to write a poem about this. Wyndham Lewis, 1917. Shells rattle windows of the shack where he snoops through people's mail. A peasant's French sheep bleat cockney refrains of ladies scrambled by cheap whiskey. He knows every way that the public can misspell endearment. Page blurs into page. A censor isn't paid to tell wives who knit mufflers cliches travel quickest on ruined rails. Swinburne would claim that last shock shook the lamp until its chimney littered the floor with clear triangles, and leave him to blink at flame naked. Mass is what's real. Solid curve bears for his painter's eye a nymphet's rump. Art betrays, Fort lets the drivel pass. There's the curve of that girl's hip. Right there.
There it is. I spoke too soon when I said you wouldn't want to go into that guy's mind for very long. You've gone into a different guy's mind for a chunk of time here. Do you think that this would benefit from an epigraph, so that, because there are lots of people now that don't know who Wyndham Lewis was in the first place?
Okay, now this is a case where if I get my out of print thesis back in print, that I would probably want to take that up. Seriously.
So I'm sorry, say that again.
All right. This one is from Migration Solo, from my out of print chapbook. So were I to try to get that back into print, or to do put two chapbooks together, that is very, very good advice. And I love the epigraph, so I don't think I'd have trouble finding an appropriate one.
Yeah.
But of course, go ahead, Dan.
No, I mean, even as my head was swimming with this poem, but I was quite lost when I first read it. Then as I read it another time or two, I got less lost. I had no idea that Wyndham Lewis was a censor. And I don't know how Swinburne got in there. It clearly is taking place in World War I, I guess, or World War something. Well, 1917, World War I. I think there were a few other things that I couldn't really follow. I immediately went to Wikipedia and read about Wyndham Lewis and learned that he was a painter as well as a writer, so that adds up. But I mean, you know, it's kind of review. It's a head spinning poem. It's brilliant in the way that your poems are. But the fact that you felt the need to give such a huge preamble to this poem is a tell that it needs something. Well, it doesn't need it.
Mm-hmm.
The reader could just sit there and have their head spun and say, I don't know what she's
Or look it up
about.
on Wikipedia.
Or look it up on Wikipedia. But still didn't get me all the way there, because I didn't home in on this.
I hear you.
You really have to home in on that censor thing. That's the key anchor to where all this takes its jumping off point.
Yes.
And so I think if you distilled an epigraph of your own creation, I think, I don't know if unless you can extract exactly.
I've done that before. Yeah,
maybe you can find the exactly right quote from a biography or something like that. I think I would have found even more to like about it. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Because I would have understood better what was being spoken of.
Okay. Well, why I'm yipping about the Wikipedia is that one of the practices when I translate Petrarch is I use italicized titles a la Richard Tottle to give biblical references or modern day songs that are sheer Petrarchism distilled from Petrarch's poetry, and we no longer remember that. And I'm trying to think about those kinds of references making, the reason Pound and Eliot had to go for a while was because they required the critic priest, and that was why we got the thing about, we need clear poems, we need simple language. They had shoved the readership of poetry away, and to save our profession, there had to be some coming back from all of this illusion and all of that stuff. Well, unfortunately, Mr. Petrarch loves allusion, and he alludes to, the classics the same way that Pound and Eliot did. And so what I'm thinking about is these italicized titles or epigraphs that now that most people who read poetry can afford phones or go to the library and look things up on the internet or things like that, that maybe the reading of a poem could become an interactive activity where it's not a critic priest. It's, here's some things that'll help you understand that. Look those up. Now read this translation. And it, people can look things up and bring more understanding. And it allows for the importance of reader input and what they begin bringing to things.
I mean, it's a redefinition of what an epigraph can do.
Right.
Yeah, you're recasting it. Although it takes a while to understand what you're doing, because we don't get an explanation of what you're doing in the epigraph. We're given these. It's great. We're given these these references. Just boom, 1, 2, 3. And they're so different. If you read some of the translations, Dan, you'd see right away. You'll get like a pop song from 1968 right alongside, some literary reference.
Mm-hmm.
But they all bring you back. If you follow them out, they will bring you back. And that's a really interesting concept, Lee, but I wonder if it doesn't require some explanation of how you want that new style epigraph to be used. That you want a kind of you want them to be breadcrumbs that will lead the reader somewhere, and that they'll eventually find their way back.
Yeah, that's the blank preface. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, even Dan, I fanned on some of these references in this poem, but the basic structure of the poem, which is that Wyndham Lewis is censoring, people's mail in the middle of World War I while bombs are going off, and his attitude towards what he's doing is all there, whether you get all the other details or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I do think the word snoops may have thrown me a little bit, because censors aren't really snooping; they're censoring. So that threw me a little at the beginning. But what basically, let me ask if I'm getting this right. It seems like it comes, it has the censorship in it, but then it departs a little and then comes back to it again and then departs again. So the peasants' French sheep lead cockney refrains of ladies scrambled by cheap whiskey. That's a hard one for me to get my mind around. I don't know if that's part of the censorship, or it's just, I guess it's just, I don't know quite what to make of that, but I don't know if that relates to it. But then he knows every way the public can misspell endearment. That sounds like something the censor would be thinking.
Yeah.
And then you have a page blurs it, and then we have a few lines that are clearly about the censor.
Yeah.
Page blurring it to page, blah, blah, blah. Cliches travel quickest on ruined rails. That sounds like a censor's maxim he may have picked up from Pound or somebody, or made it up himself. But then here comes Swinburne. And we're back here to the shock that shook the lamp, which relates back to shells rattle the windows. So there's a lot of connections swimming around here, and it doesn't settle, really stably into anything for me. But I think it could, and also maybe it shouldn't exactly. So I don't know. I just say all that to see if you have any response to my experience with it.
I think that, again, this is like the drilling the troops, that war is just seems so absurd to me that,
Hmm.
he's out there on the front line, and there are actually fields of sheep that are bleeding, and so he's so not interested in what these people have to say to each other, because it's not high art, and he doesn't want to be here. And that I think his brain wanders, and he hears other things, and his attention goes, and all this is going on at once
That's great because
until
that's what I got. I felt that thing about the sheep was in the real world, the surrounding world.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
right.
I
that's
actually
why
got
they're
that. I got
French.
that. Yeah, yeah.
That's where they're French.
That's a crazy
Oh,
good that's a crazy good line. Unto it's this a peasant's French sheep bleat Cockney refrains of ladies scrambled by cheap. That's like, I mean, the high modernists couldn't come up with anything crazier in a great way than that. It's just it's just like nuts, which is great. So I take my hat off to that achievement in that line, that sentence.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I it,
Go ahead. We lost you.
quit speaking. I have been told that my own poems are very, very difficult, and that I don't leave enough room. I need to poke holes in the box so the animal can breathe. They do.
Well, someone could. I haven't read the cantos because I don't have the time or the stomach to go through all that, even though there's such beautiful things in there. But if you read that sentence, just this poem wouldn't be completely out of place, chopped up differently in the cantos. This jumping from thing to
Right.
thing and things that could seem a
Yes.
little obscure or hard to and
Yeah,
referential in
that's
ways
true.
that. So I mean, Pound is in this thing in other ways maybe than you even intended, or maybe you did intend that partly too.
No, no. This I was immersed for 2 semesters and just mightily in love.
Cool, cool.
Well, it is good for us to remember also that this formed your master's thesis, and so it's not as though you were writing for a lay audience, so to speak.
Right, right.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, I think that gives you license to be, more hidebound.
If I get my thesis reprinted, I'm going to find an epigraph or make one up.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that would be helpful for
Yeah.
those of us who left the university a long time ago. Um, but I mean, I thought this brought it back around. I got that when Swinburne comes in, this is like in his mind. The bombs are going off, and Swinburne would say something extreme.
They
You
hated
know,
Swinburne. Oh, they hated Swinburne. Ugh. And
well,
so it was just he'd be the person to make up
Mhm.
some romantic image. And as
yes,
it turns out, Vort missed his wife and kids too.
Mhm.
yeah. I just thought that the last line brings it back around. For me, it grounded it in the basic situation. I mean, we know there's bombs going off. He's sitting there. He doesn't want to be there. He lets the drivel pass. I mean, we
Yeah, he
start with
led.
the
I mean,
shells. We end with him, shirking his duty.
But he would like a little of, his wife's companionship. So that's how he interprets the curve. I mean, it works the same thing as this. It's like the slender finger. This is the thing that he would hear these people who are married or boyfriend, girlfriend, any of this stuff with the letters going back and forth, and you know he has a wife, he has kids, and it's like, yeah, I miss. And this is another thing about the you know company, the communal fire, that this is why the uncle has the doc to entertain the guys. it seems to fit.
Hmm. Well, it is fair to say, though, that this is not linear.
No.
Yeah, yeah, and that it invites you in, but you gotta. There's a lot going on once you get in there. The door closes behind you. You're alone. You're alone with the love letters and Wyndham Lewis. Anyway, but I'm astonished at the range of I mean, this is another whole way of writing about character. I'm astonished at the range, not just of characters, literally characters, real or imagined, but also by the variety of approaches that the three of us have taken. Yeah. Because none of us has taken a consistent approach. We've all been doing something different with each character. It's almost as though the character dictates the treatment. And you get a kind of crazy character, you get a kind of crazy treatment. Okay, let's go to Dan's number 4.
Okay, so Lee likes this one. I'm glad you do.
Yes. And I know which one it is.
You know which one it is. This is the fish one, as you call it. I think of it as the salmon one. But so yes. Here we move from a human character to a non-human character. And actually, even the next one is a non-human character, too. So in a reading, I will preface this thing with the story of the Pacific salmon's life cycle. But I think we're running long here. I think maybe I'll work that in later. I'm just going to read the poem. I think that's a good way to do it.
Okay.
It's called A Salmon Speaks of the Sea. It is told in the voice of the salmon. You approach it with an image of it, but nothing prepares you for it. Shot with sun in its upper reaches, a bankless realm dims in descent, gradually devolving toward a blackness one fins through life, trying not to think about. Yet up from that nether night jut those peaks and ridges that provide so much of the grandeur here, much of the interest, too, their faces being carnivals of incident. Especially compelling are those dramas it's healthier to witness than to live. How some of them stay with me. Like that silver little's despondent swim right down the throat of an anemone, as though love loss had crushed it past caring. Never more finally has a clutch of red wormicles closed over its hole. And yet, the giant fans, slowest sway in the water wind, the manta ray, its glide a thing of a ripple of wing, the jellyfish, that parachute comprised of light. In singing these sublimities, I ask the several to stand for the innumerable. Such richesse. The river was nice, but never like this. I have no intention of ever getting over it.
Well, shades of joy, says the salmon.
What? I don't get it.
Because he coined words left and right.
Oh, yes, he did.
And he ran words together. You know, river run past Eden is the very opening of Finnegan's Wake.
Yeah.
And you do the same thing. You know, water, wind, love loss, silver little. And I know Lee enjoys this. Wormicles. Yeah.
I'm sure that was a real word.
It is now.
It is now.
Yes, it is. But you prepare for it so carefully. I get to wormicles and I'm just hammered, and I'm sure that's a word I could play on Scrabble. Nobody. I could put wormicles down there. I could tell them there was a specialized name for tentacles on anemone. And they wouldn't make me go get the dictionary. Shakespeare, only person who can do this and make up words and get away with it. Lewis Carroll, we don't take him seriously. This is children's literature. But it is so carefully built in, though, because you have so many. We start with the silver little. There's love lost. There's wormicles. There's slowest way. There's water wind. There's Parashat, which was, I'm starting to think, don't know if that one. But in Rishas, I mean, I'm not noticing these coinages because, well, I made up the word jewelless and used it in a poem one time and got criticized, and I thought jewelless was the perfect word. And if we can't make up words, who can? So I'm very much in favor of this. But about fins, this goes back to the wonderful cockfight presto changeo move. With the word fins, I'm hearing, the voice of a narrator on a PBS nature film. And then all of a sudden, here comes, you use one, which is a very kind of formal way to say you do this and you do that, as to say one does this, which is more perfect. And then all of a sudden, blip, it goes to fins, which is one syllable with a short I. An N is related to an M linguistically, and fins, and it's this weird thing, and it does all of this work because my husband watches fly fishing videos for salmon, and the minute that fins comes in here, I can see the back end of that salmon with the underwater camera just boogalooing down to the sea. Just the back end of that salmon is headed that way. It's magnificent. The things with language in here just make me, and Hopkins with the ripple of wing.
I'm glad you like that. I'm honored to get that comparison. That's great. I'll take that any day.
However, it's a death wish not to return upstream to spawn. That is the thing that at the end, opens it up and gets us toward what has to be your last poem.
Well, Al, I can respond to Lee, but maybe you had some stuff you wanted to.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to second when Lee is talking about the marriage of a more formal usage, like using the word one, but just generally the voice of this fish is a formal voice, but also a playful one because of the made up words. It's, in singing these sublimities, I asked the several to stand for the innumerable. This is a smart fish.
The salmon of wisdom.
Yeah, the salmon of wisdom. So it's just a really imaginative success in terms of trying to translate. I mean, if you asked 100 poets to imagine a salmon talking, you're the only one that's going to come up with this.
Well, I got to respond to something Lee said, and you too. When Lee mentioned the PBS documentary, she's so right on about that. That was exactly the voice that I was. George, what was the guy's name? George. He was so wonderful. The guy that narrated those natures way back when.
Yeah.
Most beautiful voice, and he was also the executive producer of the series. He was George somebody. Anyway, that was the voice I was trying to capture. I once showed this poem. I showed this poem in a workshop to Nicholas Christopher, and he said, "This is a Regency salmon." that was his way of characterizing the formality of the voice. And I'll mention something else about fins. I once took a little workshop with Gary Snyder was running it, and he objected
Mm.
to fins. He objected to fins because he said that's not how salmon swim. They swim with their whole bodies. The fins are just to make little adjustments of their. So he said you can't say they don't fin through life. And then he said, but what would you put there? They tail through life. They wiggle their whole bodies. Such was the punctilious objection of Gary Snyder. Whereas for some reason I don't seem to mind it, and I guess you like it, so that's a comfort to me.
Well, Turtle Island to Gary Snyder too.
Anyway,
I like that it's that you use it as a verb instead of a noun.
yeah. And I mean, the thing at the end that, of course, Lee, again, you've hit on the end, something happens at the end. And Death Wish, I mean, we all know enough about the life cycle of the salmon to know that it born in the river, goes down to the sea, hangs out there for a few years, fattens up, and then incredibly swims back upstream, the same river that it came from, to the place of its birth, where it lays eggs and spawns and dies. So that's the life cycle of the salmon.
Mm-hmm.
It's ineluctable, and yet this salmon loves being in the river was what it was. The sea is something else. This salmon likes the sea so much that
doesn't want to go back.
He has no intention of ever getting over it. The thing is, which the poem doesn't say, that it's not a question of intention. He has no choice.
Yeah, he has to do it.
He's bravely saying what he's saying, but actually, he'll go back.
Well, the irony, I think, is pretty clear. It's funny because hearing you talk about it in that way right now makes me realize that this salmon is a kind of a first cousin to my pig man.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I got that he was going to be a salmon of difference and not go back. You know, I was going to let the salmon have a choice.
Yeah, I mean, my reading is not the only possible reading. Your reading is also possible. This salmon is quite remarkable. This one, those instinctive tugs and so on, this one's not going to go.
I'll never eat salmon cakes in the same way again.
Oh, I will.
I mean, and the compound words, because he is a salmon after all, so salmons are going to speak a little differently than humans, and he's got his words for. Well, the humans may not have a word for that, nether night or water wind. I guess we call it a current. That's not quite it, though. So water, wind, and current don't quite mean the same thing to me. So that's why I was driven to some of these things.
No,
anyway.
they're beautiful inventions. They really are. And hearing you read Parachette completely clarified that this is the diminutive of the parachute.
Thank you. That's so heartening to hear that. I know Lee, I think, struggled with it, but that's what I meant. A diminutive. The jellyfish is like a diminutive parachute.
Well, that's what saved me, because I pictured it. I pictured the jellyfish, opening like a parachute, but not like a parachute. And that's how, but I fanned on it when I first saw it. But then when I thought about it in context, I was okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good. The other intelligent thing I thought about this when I was reading it was that something else that makes this salmon human, back to the story of Adam and Eve, is that the first job that Adam got was naming all the animals. So when this salmon makes up its own language to describe the world it's discovering, this new world, just like Adam described a new world and named everything, to name something is to have control over it. So I think maybe that was why I was willing to give your salmon like human will or choice, is because of this human naming and controlling. And
that's interesting.
That's very interesting, Lee. Amazing.
Yeah, that's neat. Yeah. It's great to have an interpreter that bails you out like that, isn't it?
I know. Without Lee, I'd be nowhere. I'll just two more quick things I feel like saying about it, but I will because they're so short. I had in my ear that Disney movie with Captain Nemo, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where he goes into his parlor and plays the organ. And
James Mason.
James Mason. I was thinking of the phrase plein orgue, full organ, organ with all this. I wanted the language in this poem to be like Nemo's organ, undersea.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So
Great.
that's one thing that drove me in the formal direction. And the other thing is I had this one little comparison here. Uh, this little silverfish swims down the throat of an anemone as though love loss had crushed it past caring. And I said to myself, that's reversed. It would normally be, I felt I broke up with somebody, love loss crushed me, kind of like a fish swimming down the throat of an anemone. That would normally be I forget which is the tenor and which is the vehicle. But here, the crazy thing, the vehicle is actually acting as the tenor. And this salmon is comparing that to love loss, whereas most human beings, I think, would compare love loss to X. In this case, maybe not that necessarily. Anyway, I said, what is that? I wonder if there's a name for that to I consider like an inverted metaphor. But other than that, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. And I don't think I ever wrote another poem quite like this one because the subject was so unique in the voice of the salmon, not my voice. So anyway,
Right.
Thank you for your attention to it.
Yeah. Nice. It's different.
Good. Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Well, I do want to move us along. The poem that I'm going to read next to last here is it's another one of those true to life events that it would have been nice to make it up, but luckily I didn't have to make it up.
Right.
So that's good. It's called a private conversation. And for an epigraph, I have this little fragment of Yeats that I've always loved. Out of nothing it came, out of the forest loam, out of the dark night where lay the crowns of Nineveh. And don't ask me why I've chosen it as the epigraph, because I couldn't tell you. But it's an older poem. But okay, a private conversation. Events of moment from my student days. One speaks up brightly lit in memory. It was a party at my mentor's house for celebrated guest Anthony Burgess. He had finished his required appearances. This was a chance to settle and unwind before other commitments took him elsewhere. The air was thick with writers circling. His hair combed forward like an emperor, he fielded the petitions of the guests, who hovered just a little bit too close and pecked away at him for bits of time. It was a boisterous affair, but with the movie of A Clockwork Orange fresh in memory, the talk was not about the studio's ending, which he didn't like. Nor was he asked of how he crept into Shakespeare's head in Nothing Like the Sun. We knew enough to keep away from that. When my chance came, I turned the talk to music. I knew he'd written symphonies, but not that, as he said, he'd helped to pay his way through school by playing standards in late-night stints at well-worn pub pianos. I mentioned that I played and sang in clubs, all the old songs. He knew the repertoire. We eyed the corner with the baby grand across the crowded living room, untended. His wife, Liana, clearly pleased, Italian, bubbling with pride, liked the idea. She urged him, calling him Antonio endearingly, to go to the piano. We picked our way through unsuspecting guests. He settled on the bench and we discussed the plan of action. He knew all my keys. They were the ones he'd always used himself. We started quietly, his eyes cast down, exchanging notes on Isn't It a Pity? Slipping into character and story was all the talk of Heine that we needed. The voices dropped to murmurs in the room, became an audience. I told myself, it's not for them, but let them overhear our gossip in the language of the songs. His chords, my melody, a conversation about the stories of Berlin and Gershwin, Porter, Dietz and Schwartz, and Harry Warren, each of us listening for the other's views. And it went on for hours, as I remember, us carrying the music in our arms, sealed off from writers jockeying for wit. We had escaped into a private world. At least, that's how I always told the story. But maybe it was just a song or two. Once your imagination goes to work, the story can become your memory. After 40 years or so had passed, I learned my mentor's wife was still alive. I wondered on a whim if she remembered. Since no one now is safe from being found, out of the blue, I sent a message to her, who must by now be well into her 80s. Did she recall the party where I sang while Burgess backed me on her baby grand? Weeks went by. She was somehow alive, but nothing came. That's that, I thought. It's gone. She's wandered too far down some darkened hall. And she's the only witness left who'd know. All the other principals have passed. I never knew the names of half the guests. So maybe after all it didn't happen, at least not in the way that I recall. Then, out of a blue that proved to be identical, back came a clear reply. That party, there's no way I could forget it. You both kept going far into the night. The past is gone. What can we call our own? However bright and warm the memory, we take a deeper draught of satisfaction when others sit with us around the fire.
Around the fire. I love this poem.
Nice, nice.
I love this poem.
Why don't you, since you like it, why don't you tell us about it? Tell us why.
Oh, this is that fire I have been talking about as a theme that I see running through all of our character poems and the general trajectory that the remarks have, all of them have taken, I think. This seems to me an awful lot like Wyndham Lewis. It's the same fire, just a smaller flame in the case of Wyndham Lewis. You know, it's that same fire. It's the same fire that the uncle wants to create in his pub, you know, to have the community with these guys who did go to war. It's and I've been this person too. I was at one of those, and this is so true to life about how those parties were, because
Absolutely.
that was one time I was going into Roger Mitchell's kitchen. He was having the party for us at his house after it was Stephen Dunn. His Local Time had just come out, and he was doing a reading and teaching our MFA workshops, being a guest, you know, commenter. And I went into Roger's kitchen to get another drink, and here is the guest of honor standing there by himself. Nobody is pecking at him for moments of his time. He's standing there watching the rest of us yo-yos get drunk. And I had never seen such a thing before. And I went over and found him, and he was happy just to have one person to talk to. I have never met another, you know, so I understand how the speaker, whom Al says is very similar to himself, or is himself, you know, I really can understand what this feeling of making a world with this person who has been very successful doing what you want to do someday, and to be able to click with that person on a level that doesn't have to do with shop talk, like they're a real person. That's real important, I think. That here's the fabulous, oh my goodness, and Burgess, Clockwork Orange, he's just about the same as Wyndham Lewis as far as what he was doing with literature and his writer's persona and all that kind of stuff. So if I were to rename our festivities this evening, I would talk about it as good, evil, and art.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it seems to me, is we're talking about good, evil, and art.
So you see why it's called a private conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because we were alone, although we had a crowd that was listening.
But you didn't care.
No, we weren't really even aware of them. Because it's this conversation, and if there's something about a singer with a single accompanist, with a piano accompanist, that even when you're doing songs, particularly when you're doing songs that you both know but you haven't played together before, so you're discovering each other as you're doing the song. And there are different kinds of accompanists. There are some that set the tempo for you to guide you through the song.
Mm-hmm.
There are others that, he figured out immediately that I didn't need anybody to guide me through the song. And so he followed me, which is great when you can do that, because then as a singer, it opens up your phrasing and you can do everything that you want to do. He was an excellent accompanist, but partly because he figured out right away that I didn't need any help with the time. I didn't need any directions on where to phrase. I knew what I was about. And so we very, very quickly established this, it's a very kind of close and intimate exchange that a single singer and a single, like a pianist or sometimes a single guitarist, establishes. So it really was a conversation. And yet it was done using the currency of exchange was these great songs. And so I guess you need to know, or it's helpful to know a little bit near the beginning. Isn't It a Pity has there's a part in Isn't It a Pity where the voice, the person singing, says, they're talking about how they're in two different, they had never met before. And so the whole song is about how they were in different places doing different things. And this one couplet is, you reading Heine, I somewhere in China. And so that's what slipping into character and story was, all the talk of Heine that we needed. That's what that's about.
Okay.
Yeah,
how can I listen to this song? Who did it?
My favorite version of this song, I prefer it with female vocalists. And my favorite one is a female vocalist whom I love dearly, named Teddy King, who made a record near the end of her life. She didn't live that long, but she made a record with just with a piano player. And one of the songs she recorded was Isn't It a Pity? And so for me, it was a particular touchstone of a song that I learned by listening to a single vocalist with a single piano accompaniment. A lot of standards that I've learned in jazz versions where there's full bands, but this was different, and it's one of Ira Gershwin's best lyrics, I believe. So I would say, So I would go to Teddy King, and her first name is spelled Teddi.
Okay. Oh, I know E on the end. I had an E on the end.
No E on the end.
But this process you're talking about if people want to listen to something similar to what you're talking about, The Girl from the North Country, done by Dylan and Johnny Cash. At the end
Yeah.
of that, it's almost as if they are just working it out in front of you, how to harmonize, and they're playing games with each other and going this way, and Cash goes that way, and Dylan goes this way, and it is like being right in the room with them, watching this process of these
Yeah.
great musicians working together. And that's
Well,
the kind of process we're talking about.
Yeah, except in their case, they were working it out, and they didn't know. They were feeling their way through the song, but
Yes.
with quite a lot of hesitation, because they had so much respect for each other that they
Right.
didn't want to step on each other's toes. And so with Burgess, we were more hand in glove. I mean, we were really working together. He was ready for what I was doing, and I was ready for what he was doing. There was no hesitation at all. But that's a really interesting example of singers clearly trying to do something together for the first time, and primarily listening, and then sometimes singing, but
Yeah.
mostly listening. Which is, you're right, it's a great object lesson. It's funny because I can kind of feel what each one is feeling when they're hesitating.
Yes, and I don't even sing.
Because they're only hesitating because they don't want to step on each other. And it's
they
fascinating.
want to play together nicely. They want to play
Yes.
together nicely. That desire to make harmony is so palpable.
Yeah, normally you see people that have worked all that out in advance. So in this case, they were working it out in front of a camera that was capturing it, and it's memorable.
Yes, it is.
You know that too, Dan.
Oh, I know that session, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think Lee is making very good. It's apt to bring that into the discussion of this poem, because they clearly are. Yeah, they're hesitating, but I don't. Well, it doesn't matter. I hear it maybe a little different than you. I hear them more maybe the way Lee was intending, is really, really listening to each other, really playing with each other, playing with the melody a little bit. But but that's neither here nor there. I think it's a good comparison. This poem is completely clear. As always, it takes its time to say the stuff that has to be said, and I love the way it takes its time with two main thrusts. One is the description, as Lee said, of the party, and the sociological and anthropological stuff that's going on in that.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. The air was thick with riders circling, which, by the way, is there's one of the tetrameters. The air was thick with riders circling. I have a lot of trouble getting 5 out of that, but that's no problem. And
circling, 3 syllables.
Circling? Oh, Lord.
Circling.
No wonder. All right.
I'm kidding.
I know. I hope so.
You're right. You're right.
And we knew enough to keep away from that. But I'm not. Let me get. The other thing, of course, is the completely admirable and also justifiably extended, beautifully worked out description of what it was like for you to connect with each other musically. Each of us listening for these are inventive ways of talking about this. Let them overhear our gossip in the language of songs. All the talk of Heine that we needed, which I didn't even know that Heine was in the lyrics of that song. These people are talking about literature, and all you needed to do to talk about any literature was to play music together. Forget Heine, which at least that's the way I read it. And I thought that worked beautifully.
And that's okay too, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and listening for each other's views. So both of those things, the description of the party and then the description of the way you work together in music, were superb to my ear and my mind. And then the way the story, the actual practical story works itself out is intriguing. It's not unexpected. It's not exactly a surprise ending, but it's still a beautiful ending. And it's a little, I have one or two poems like this. It's a little self-congratulatory, but sometimes something is so wonderful that you're completely justified to congratulate. We all need to congratulate ourselves about something special like this. And this was clearly extremely special for both of you, and even for her.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah,
I think
his wife loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's about it. I mean, I did find, for what it's worth, Through School by Playing Standards is not 5 to me either. You told me to look out for them. That to me is in 3. Through School by Playing Standards. So if you can get 5 out of that one, I tip my hat to you. You're more ingenious than I am.
By Playing Standards. Okay, this is a songwriting thing I think that I have discovered, is that when I need extra syllables, I kind of go into what one of the most important things I learned from Al's songwriting class was pay attention, because you will get stress on a long syllable. As crazy as it sounds, I didn't study classical meters where there was length and duration. And half the time in my dialect, you will blur that by into b. It becomes a schwa so that you can lead over it in natural speech. But if you actually pronounce the words the way they should be, they have those long syllables that can give the reader, except for one as astute as you are, whose hearing is as acute as yours, you can get people to go along with you that there's more stress, just because that they will see it in their brains as a long I, and they don't listen to it as a buh in the speech.
No,
I think that's what's going on.
You're being generous, but I think Dan is right. I mean, a line like "bubbling with pride, like the idea." Bubbling with pride.
That's fine. Bubbling with it. You can do
that. Yeah, one's fine.
You can get a 5 out of it. In a prevailing context of 5s, you can read that as a 5.
All right. I call foul on myself on there, but I see what you're saying. But you're absolutely right about the, what was that? Through School by Playing Standards. That's just, Homer nods.
Yeah, but it's somehow, it's very common in the Pope era of heroic couplets and stuff.
Right.
It's very common to diversify so that pentameter doesn't become too much of a drum.
Yeah.
You often get a tetrameter in there. I think they're doing it very intentionally to diversify just a little bit.
Yeah.
And
but I wasn't. It's just an oversight. I just dropped the ball.
Okay, well, fair enough.
So many thousands of lines we churn out like sausages.
I know.
But anyway, all right. So let me ask you this: there is quite, as you point out, the first 2 parts of the poem, but the third part of the poem is about the uncertainty of memory.
Right.
And so when you say that there's something that's a little self-congratulatory, there's also something that's a little self-effacing by saying, well, maybe it was only 1 or 2 songs.
Absolutely. In fact, I put a check next to that. At least that's how I always told the story. But maybe it was just once your imagination goes to work. And I put a check mark there, and I wrote to myself, "This is what elevates this poem."
Yeah, it could be that. I allow for that. But
yeah, you do absolutely, and I think that's I'm glad you hit that point. Again, it's late in the day here, but that really does put a cross current against the self-congratulatoriness to the extent that it's there, and so you're
right. Maybe it was.
You're completely open. You let both those currents wash through each other. Excellent.
Right,
but that's
and that's
thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Lee.
That's the thing that makes that last stanza possible, though, is that when
it makes a confirmation.
When he doubts his own veracity, and goodness, my mother was really, really good at letting her memory of something be embroidered and taken over. I mean, I have known people who have done that. But the fact that he says, oh, well, nobody else knows this story except for me and possibly his wife now, because he's lost touch with everybody else. And then that's the thing that allows him to get back to, you know, the fire and the place with the duck for entertainment. I mean, it's this where
it's nice to
others. Yeah. What is the point of what we're doing? You know, I wrote on another piece of paper somewhere, this is the thing about, you know, if the tree falls in the forest and nobody's there, did it happen? You know, if you don't have somebody who heard the tree fall.
Yeah.
And it's that thing. And there is a kind of not even it is a modesty and a humility about our evanescence, I guess.
Well, it was going to be a great memory no matter what.
Right.
But actually hearing back from my mentor's wife that what happened did happen as I remembered it was, I mean, on one level, you're gathering around the fire, and so you're in the company of the experience, of the truth of the experience. But also, it's a confirmation. It was like giving me part of that memory back, that I could have. I was always going to have a good memory, but now I could have a better feeling about the good memory.
So I have two quick questions. Is it in fact true that you question to yourself whether you had, in your imagination, had broadened that event out to something more than it was, or did you? To me, if you had spent all night singing with Anthony Burgess, you wouldn't question whether you spent all night.
No,
singing.
I didn't.
Yeah, okay, that's an honest answer. I appreciate your candor.
Well, I mean, I probably put it in for the reason that you gave.
Yeah,
to make me look better.
Right. Fair enough, and it does. I fell for it. I fell for it even as I was questioning it a little bit, but I fell for it.
I appreciate that.
But just one other quick thing. The next to last stanza, out of a blue that proved to be identical. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by identical? Identical? Both of you were in the same place, but can you sharpen that just a little bit for me? If you think it's worth the time. If not, we can just move ahead.
There had to be another something else that came out of the blue.
There is one in the poem. I remember it.
Oh, thank you. Out of the blue. Out of the blue, I sent a message to her, who must by now be well into her 80s. Then out of a blue that proved to be identical, back came a clear reply.
Oh, it goes all the way back to that. Okay, that answers my question.
Yeah,
that's what it's identical to. I just didn't make the connection. That's my fault.
Yeah, they're not that close, but it's there.
Yeah. Fair enough. Good.
All right.
He always pairs that stuff, and all the pieces always fit.
Yeah, unless Homer nods, which sometimes happens. But anyway, I try not to let people see that. But occasionally, a hawk-like presence catches me out.